We'll go right to the phone lines. Well, let's talk to Tim in El Paso, Texas. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Hank. I just wanted to say thank you for your ministry, and I have a question, and it's probably just a matter of clarification, because you were talking about the days of creation in Genesis, and from what I remember, I thought you said that the days were given to help us remember, but that they're not necessarily to outline the events in a chronological order. So I'm wondering if I heard you correctly, and if so, then could you explain that?
Well, yeah, I think what we have is 6 literal days. In fact, the first 3 days, even though it's before the creation of the sun, moon, and stars on the 4th day, are given in such a way that we are to assume that these are literal 24-hour days, because they start with the notion of evening and morning, the first day, or morning and evening. And so the days are given to us in such a way that we can remember God's purposes in creation. They're not necessarily given to us in the sense of how or the timetable. It gives us a way of remembering that God created all things and that human beings are the crowning jewels of his creative prowess.
So I guess I'm having a kind of an issue with this, because what I see is that scientists will say that the Big Bang happened and galaxies and stars formed, whereas the Bible actually has something different. And so...
No, the Bible says in the beginning. The Big Bang presupposes a Big Banger. So the Big Bang does not in any way militate, whether it's true or not is another question, but it doesn't militate against the notion in the beginning God.
And I agree with you on that. What I'm concerned about is the order of events. So within the Big Bang model, you have galaxies and stars forming before the Earth, and the Earth is a molten hot rock. Whereas in the Bible, God creates the Earth first, and then the stars on the 4th day. And so what I'm concerned about is if you take away the way in which God says that he did it, I'm concerned that you undermined that God did it, and I'm wondering if you would hold the position that it does hold to reality, that not only are the days literal 24 hours, but also the events that took place in each day, would they be accurate as well, or is there an allowance to shift that around?
Well, I think there are various perspectives within the Christian camp on the days. I think we should acknowledge that in answering the question that you're asking. There's a popular 24-hour view that posits that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 sequential literal days. And a majority in that camp views the universe to be approximately 6,000 years old and considers all death, including animal death, to be a direct function of Adam's fall. Then you have a day-age perspective, which suggests that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 long sequential days, with each day totaling billions of years. And to contrast that to the 24-hour perspective, the day-age view maintains that human and animal suffering and death are a result of God's very good creation prior to Adam's fall into a life of perpetual sin terminated by death. And then there are other views, like the framework perspective, which holds that the 7 days of creation are non-literal, non-sequential, but nonetheless historical. And in concert with the day-age perspective, framework perspective views hold that animal death before the fall is consistent with the goodness of God's creation and believes that the age question is settled by natural revelation or by the book of nature rather than by special revelation in the Bible. So the Bible, therefore, in this view, does not tell us the age of the earth. That question is settled by looking at God's imprimatur in general revelation.
Okay.
So those are the various views that are held. Now, there are permutations of those views, but I think that you have to start with this. You have to start with reading the Bible for all it's worth, and that means understanding the language of Genesis. So, for example, when God says to Adam and Eve, "Where are you?" do we say, wow, God lost his omniscience? Or if God walks in the garden, does that mean God has big feet? If we say yes to those questions, we undermine biblical authority at the very beginning. So it's important to read the Bible in the sense in which it's intended. If, for example, we think that Eve was tempted by a talking snake, wow, now Satan has the creative ability to take on form. And if he does, he could have masqueraded as the resurrected Christ. Now we lose epistemic warrant for the resurrection. So I think it's really critical that we read the Bible for all it's worth and recognize that when Moses talks about the snake in the garden, or when John talks about a dragon in the book of Revelation and he's referring to Satan, they're not telling us what Satan looks like, but what Satan is like: cunning, devious, lethal. And if we miss that, and now we make Satan into a being that can create, wow, it undermines the Bible at its very beginning. So the plea here is to learn to read the Bible for all it's worth and to recognize that God is communicating his purposes in creation, not necessarily giving us a chronology of creation. And if we go the chronological route, then isn't there a contradiction between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2?
Well, the way that I understand it is that Genesis 2 is a further explanation of Genesis 1. And
no, that's right. I think that's absolutely true.
Well, and so I was watching a debate between Ken Hovind and Dr. Hugh Ross, and Dr. Hugh Ross, a lot of these old Earth proponents, they'll point to the fact that, it's impossible for galaxies and stars to have formed within thousands of years. And what they're doing is within the context of the historical narrative, which they're adopting philosophical naturalism. Of course it would be impossible for these things to have happened naturally. But what do we know about creation? In the beginning, God. And so my concern is to not move with the trends of what science or scientists are saying, and to go by what the Bible says. And
well,
so
I mean, look, I would agree with that, but I have great difficulty with both the views held by Hugh Ross and Kent Hovind. Both of them, I have huge problems with both their perspectives. But here's the issue. At the end of the day, I think you have to get back to this hermeneutical question, and that is reading the Bible for all it's worth. Young Earth creationists that believe in a 6,000-year-old world, they won't read the Bible literally because they won't take the first 3 days as literal 24-hour days. They can't because the sun...
I do.
They don't as solar days because the sun didn't exist, in their view, until the fourth day.
But light did,
But we're not talking about light. We're talking about solar days here, and I want to take the Bible literally. I don't want to compromise that, and that seems to me that you're fudging there a little bit.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
And what I mean when I say literal, it doesn't mean taking it in a wooden literal sense, but in the sense in which it's intended. And I think the sense in which this is intended is to give us God's purposes in creation and recognizing that humankind is the crowning jewel of God's creation. And that's consistent with the entire way in which Genesis is written. So we need to understand it in the sense in which it's intended. Thanks for calling in. Good spirited conversation. I love the fact that we have people like Tim who listen. And when they find that they're caught in a bit of a conundrum, they don't just keep talking. I haven't thought about that. That is commendable.